Welcome, data people. We are Zuma. My name is Matt, and this is the Data for Good podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Zuma. Zuma is a dedicated recruitment company focusing on data positions across Berlin. The Data for Good podcast is for the world of data science, analytics, and engineering, giving you a platform to hear the thoughts and opinions of data leaders from Berlin and beyond. Today, we are joined by Boyan Angelov, data and AI consultant, author, and lead of AI strategy at Exxeta. Boyan, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to this episode for sure. For those who don't know who you are, can you give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. Let me do it. So I've done quite a few different things in my career. I like to split it into two parts. So I would say a long time ago, I was a data scientist, and it feels like ages ago. Back then, data science wasn't really, especially in Germany, wasn't really so established like it is now. It was still a weird title, right? So it felt very strange to call myself a data scientist. So that's where I spent the first half of my career. I studied before this more in the bioinformatics field. So I come a bit like from I think this is relevant for what we're going to talk about later. So I come from a bit of a different angle because, of course, you have most people coming from computer science, mathematics. I mean, I come from biology, bioinformatics. So it's a bit of a odd one. And I do think that impacted me a bit later. So being a data scientist, you can imagine a very, very technical role. At some point when I became senior, I came at the crossroad to start to understand, okay, what should I do now, right? I mean, there's different roles that you can take. And I completely, by accident, that's how many things happen in one's career, all right? I mean, you always say that looking backwards, everything makes sense. But I'll be honest, I mean, the next job after that was very accidental. It was basically in consulting. And consulting didn't feel like a very obvious choice to me because, to be honest, I always thought of myself as a more introverted person. And consulting, has a reputation of being very fit for extroverted people. So I ended up there and I absolutely loved it, right? And my role was that of a data and AI strategist. And that was also, again, a new type of weird title, which wasn't established back then. Spent a few years there, learned all kinds of things like that. The experience there at that job made me write the book, The Elements of Data Strategy, where I put all that I learned. After this, I took another, you could say, left turn because I became a CTO. And that's like a totally different beast again, right? That was a very, very different job. I do think management consulting prepared me quite a lot for this, but of course, you need to learn all kinds of new things that we can cover today about skills. After doing that, I came back to consulting, because that's around the time when I published my second book, and I thought, I have some unfinished business. So now I'm back in the bread and butter of what I do, which is data and AI strategy. So, and I absolutely love doing that.
Amazing. And we're hopefully going to tap into some of this experience and knowledge today. And yeah, if anyone doesn't know the books, do check them out. I'm sure we can link them up as well. But today we're here to talk about that. So data and consulting. To set the scene, what do we mean when we're talking about data and consulting?
Yeah, I mean, consulting, like probably most people feel like how I felt back then. Like when I heard consulting, working for a consulting company, I don't know, just imagine some people with suits, like going around doing PowerPoint, and basically doing all like the non-technical communication, this type of work, which of course is a big part of the job, but it's a whole career, right? It's a whole different field. I mean, there's all kinds of consultants you can imagine, right? I mean, you have consultants who probably, if you're an airline company, you have some people who are pilots before they consult you on this. In mechanical engineering, you have consultancies. But in terms of data, that's an odd one, I would say, because the people who consult in our field, they are also super different, right? We have a very diverse field. Normally, in the type of consulting which I've always done, I felt that the consulting is everything which is focused on delivering value, which is not coding. And everything that you do around this in a way is consulting. And that's strange things perhaps to say, because people think, well, I work as a head of data in a startup. So who do I consult? I mean, I'll be honest, you're always consulting. You're always consulting somebody. especially at some point, at some level of seniority, you always consult somebody. And the skill of consulting is basically reducing complexity, explaining topics, and making sure things work out. Yeah, and this obviously sounds easier said than done, but it's a concrete collection of skills that you can learn, right? I mean, there's obvious things like being great at PowerPoint, but there's some less obvious things like how can you explain data topics to people who don't know about them, right? You have a lot of negotiation topics. For example, as a data person, unfortunately, many of us need to explain the value of our work, which is, to be honest, sometimes recently I started to think a lot about this because in other fields in software, like front-end, back-end development, you don't really have that, right? If like a front-end or back-end team, they work, the leaders, the people who do the consulting, right? They don't need to explain the value of it, right? That often, as we do, for some reason, probably because it's such an like black box field that we have, we need to explain. And I would say this explaining is the fundamental part of consulting, and with it is the negotiation. Yeah, I mean, can you negotiate a budget for your work? How do you deal with competing interests? So all of this is part of consulting.
So some people will be thinking, is consultancy for me? And maybe it's not, maybe it is. How much of a foundational level of knowledge do you need to have in a certain specific area to become a consultant?
That's, I mean, the number one skill, I think, and this is the biggest hurdle for most technical people, let's say. If you focus about technical people, especially in data becoming consultants, I think the number one hurdle is that those people are rarely okay with ambiguity, right? Like often technical people want certain things, like you want to talk about concrete things which are tangible. And the technical people often, like I was myself, very quickly frustrated with the intangibles of the work, yeah? Because as technical people, you think, well, I mean, how hard can a business be, right? You build a product, you sell the product, and these are the 5 things you need to do. But then you realize, especially the more senior you become as a technical person, is that a lot of the work is actually explaining a lot of relationship. So if the foundational skill here is that you start to become okay with ambiguity, right? You start to be not being frustrated with doing such work. And I think these are the technical people who can become consultants, are the ones who can let go of these very structured ways of working, right? You start to be comfortable in discussing vague things, where people have a different understanding of the work, and you're just kind of emotionally, intellectually okay with doing this. In my case, because I come from the bioinformatics field, right, and biology, so for me, I was anyways I had a different way of thinking, right? So I was never a really technical person in that sense, yeah. So I don't come from engineering or mathematics, so I think for me that jump was a bit easier. So I think that's the foundational skill, this kind of tolerance for this part of the work. If you have this, everything else is kind of you obtain from deliberate practice. Yeah, I mean, you need to, and to be honest, the only way to be successful is to enjoy doing this. You have to enjoy doing this type of work, right? Talking to people. That's like talking to people and influencing them. A lot of writing. And a lot of working with complex things which are outside of your control. So these are kind of foundational skills. I can point actually the listeners to, if they want to dive deeper a bit about what are specific skills. There's one skill which is recently more kind of formalized, is systems thinking. And I remember the first time when I heard about this, I was still a technical person. And I was thinking, well, this is like the McKinsey guys to talk about systems thinking. It's kind of this super abstract thing, but I don't know. To me, it didn't feel very tangible and very useful. So fortunately for me, I stumbled across one article, and we can link it after this, which defines what systems thinking is and what are the skills for this. And when I was reading this, I understood what actually am I doing? What are the concrete skills? And there are topics, for example, the saying like, can you look at the forest and the trees at the same time? Let me give you an example. As a head of data, what you do in the morning, sometimes you might be looking at some pull request for some kind of Python script, your data engineers wrote, super technical, and maybe you don't write the code yourself, but you look at the code, and then at lunch you need to meet like whatever the chief data officer, and they talk to you about the market, about the macroeconomics, right, and about the culture or whatever strategy, and like shifting between those two. This is very difficult. It's very, very difficult in the same day. And this is a system skill, right? So you can be productive in switching focus between very different things and being okay with this. And I think many people, especially middle level managers, struggle with this because at the same time you have to be individual contributor. At the same time, like later in the day, you have to do very strategic things, right? And the strategic things, normally they are, how can I say, you are more often interrupted there, you have more meetings, right? So this is something I struggled a lot, to be honest. Like it was very difficult that phase of my career, like where you need to do both,
Right.
There's no way around it, I think. You just have to do it. I mean, good time management helps, but to make the circle, this is a systems thinking skill. Another one maybe is how can you like separate, how can you describe very complex thing, let's say taking a data architecture, a topic which you can imagine like the data people have to explain to somebody else, and this is probably the worst topic to explain because it just doesn't make any sense to say architecture. People imagine something else, right, if you're not technical. And then this is one thing, and second problem with that topic is that it's how can I say, it doesn't seem productive. If your data team tells you, we're gonna work on the data architecture, I can tell you most C-level business owners, they'll say, I mean, where's the money there? What does that do? And explaining such topics, like a technical person, what they think is they should do like take the technical diagram, right? Like normally you have the very technical description of what different things do, and just show that. That has some kind of terms like, it has an ingestion layer, a processing layer, orchestration layer. And then you can imagine how such a meeting would go, and your counterpart to me is be lost. What do you say, orchestration, like orchestra? You think about classical music, What you need to do to reduce the complexity as a skill is to be able to take such a thing and say, look, data architecture is kind of like if you have a factory which processes oil, is kind of your pipes, filters, this type of stuff which enables the flow of data, which is around. And you to be able to produce a lot of oil, you need to have very good pipes. And stuff like this you need to say. And this is consulting. I mean, this is classic consultancy skill that you need to have.
Do you think that's the reason for the strong correlation between consulting and analysts? There's a lot of analysts that are in consulting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who come from business analysis and consulting because they're kind of more forced to be closer to the business. They really need to understand how the business works, and I think people who come from data analysis, I mean, for them it's a bit easier. They're kind of on the border, like there's a spectrum of technical people, and I would say the data architects, engineers, even for me as a data scientist back then, they looked very technical. I felt non-technical compared to them. So on the spectrum, a data scientist also, if you're a good one, you're also supposed to understand the business. Otherwise, I mean, you can't work. And then to the right, if you think on the left, you have technical, rational people, and on the right, you have more business-focused people, like the data scientists are there, and then after us is the data analysts, right? And then you have business intelligence people. They also for them, it's even easier to explain topics, I think. So maybe for them, consulting probably would be easier jump. But I can tell you the value of being extremely good at something like data architecture and being able to explain this. They almost know people like that. I mean, I know a few. Fortunately, at Exxeta, we have a few very great ones. But those people are few and far between. So if you're very good in a very abstract, like hard to get into technical topic and can explain this, I think you can cover your own niche, I would say.
Do you see it being even more of a requirement, of a demand, that more people have both these skills, is being a good consultant without technical background or technical person who isn't strong in consulting? Is that world gone where there's two separations? We need to see more of one.
Yeah, I think you have this specialization in the data field, right? I mean, back then, I told you we had just, I mean, data scientists, statisticians we had, and backend developers. Even data engineers was like the title which came later, and you start to see after this, we got the machine learning engineers, now you have the data strategist, you have the ML ops specialists, you have this growing specialization which the market requires. So, for example, you might be a data engineering consultant or a data architecture strategist. I don't know. I suspect you're going to have these flavors of people because you do need both, right? Because, of course, even if you're a very good architect who can be a good consultant, you can't. These are two modes of work. So I would say it would be very hard for you to be an individual contributor and do a lot of consulting and explaining at the same time. So I do think those will be separate. But the market really needs the second type. Yeah, I mean, it's even more rare. Like the consulting flavor of technical people is even more rare than the like very hardcore technical person. So if I was a technical person now, and I was, as I said, I had like a sparkle of patience with the abstract, I will definitely lean into it because that would just be great for your career, even if you don't work in consulting. Yeah, because as I said, let's say you're a senior data architect, and you're really intelligent, you do great work. If you don't do the consulting part, if you take two people with the same skill set, one of them does the consulting too, which basically means explaining to the other people the importance of this. I can tell you it's obvious which one is going to be more successful, right? In many ways, more successful, most importantly for the business, and they'll be rewarded for this because the one who explains such topics and can negotiate things like budgets and people, they're going to go further. Yeah.
So if you were to advise someone going on this journey that you've been on, or starting today, where would you start?
That's an excellent question. I mean, I'm always focused on data and AI strategy, right? And this is the purpose of the book. And I would say like any company needs that, right? And most companies don't have one, right? And what you see normally, especially in like smaller companies, is instead of a strategy, you have a list of goals, which is my favorite, right? So you have like, we need to be, I don't know, cloud native. We need to have X amount of people, and we need to be very innovative. Yeah, that's not a strategy. A strategy is much, much more. So a technical person can start by working on a strategy. I think maybe that's a good first thing. But the more I think about it, maybe it's even better if they just start to explain the work a bit better. Yeah, they should start to see. I mean, to start, you kind of have to go outside of yourself, right? You have to start to pay attention to what other people are saying, yeah? And because to be honest, if you're a technical person, next time when you say data orchestration, just stop and pause and look around, like how your non-technical colleagues react, and then try to go an extra mile to explain to them, yeah? And in any organization, you'll find those problems where people don't understand your value, right? What you're doing. But even imagine you have a perfect company, right? Everybody knows what you're doing. Still, like finding a new use case, for example, yeah. As a senior person, head of data, for sure, you need to do consulting basically, and you need to find the use cases, and finding the use cases requires you to talk to people and understand the business. And this is the most typical place to start, I think, trying to kind of, you can imagine you're digging a hole somewhere in the yard as your job, and then you need to kind of leave the hole, look around what's going on, right? Around you. Actually, by the way, it's one of my favorite examples of the importance of doing consulting, is because we as technical people, the best ones, they dig a perfect hole, right? They go and they dig and dig and dig right to maybe they're on the other end of the earth. But I have seen exactly this, but they dig the hole in the wrong garden. That's what I always see. They do something absolutely brilliant, the best data architecture, the best machine learning model, which nobody uses. And that's the most frustrating thing I've ever seen in my technical career. Yeah, it's exactly the very smart people just building perfect solutions for something nobody cares. And that's because nobody did the non-technical part around it. And it's not so hard. You just have to, from time to time, make sure, are you doing the right thing?
What would you advise for that transition? Because a lot of senior technical individual contributors, because they are so strong, will be handed a managerial or lead position where it's just thrust upon them.
Yeah.
What do you advise there? How do you take a more holistic business view?
Yeah, you said it yourself. That's very interesting what you said, because it's exactly that holistic business view. I mean, all of those words also sound a bit like systems thinking or design thinking, a bit like, okay, what do you mean? I can give you an example. You can start by, this is what we normally do in consulting, is you make a stakeholder map. Yeah, and this is like you leaving the hole where you're digging and looking around. And that basically means you need to map your whole company. And you take a tool like Miro or Mural or any whiteboard or just a piece of paper and just put your data team in the center and just draw everybody who has some connections with it, like draw your team in the center, then maybe the marketing team, then you have a sales team, then you have operations team, HR team, backend team, front-end team, design team, management team. I guess most companies have all of those.
Yeah.
Just draw them, put the people who are there and try to see what are the connections between you and them. Yeah, there's always something. And for example, you might remember that the HR team, whatever, some years ago went to a conference, and they went to like a data-driven HR conference, and they asked you 2 years ago, hey, can you help me use this solution to gather data perhaps? And now, because you're taking this kind of holistic view, you remember this and you write you make this connection to the HR team and you write, okay, this was a use case. Yeah. Then any sales team, that's the easiest use cases for data are there. Like in any organization, the sales, any organization gets customers, yeah, and users. So the sales team and the marketing team, they always have good data that is important for the business, yeah. And you always can find the first use cases there. And my advice would be to go to those places, see, are you doing something with them? If not, what should be done? How does their data look like? I mean, probably in Salesforce or something like some CRM, and see, try to convince them to have a more data-driven approach, right? This is if your organization doesn't do anything like that. Yeah. For example, let's say you are in a startup and you are the senior data scientist, and suddenly you need to be the head of data. You got the budget, business goes well, and this is the first thing you need to do. I think that's straightforward. Like what's more difficult is when you are in an established organization. Yeah. Let's say you have like, I don't know, 2,000 people as a head count, and you have a team of 200 developers, yeah, and you are a part of, you were just given to be the head of data analytics, yeah, that's your role. Well, then the stakeholder map is going to be very challenging because there's so many different things, and in bigger companies you see teams reinventing the wheel sometimes, yeah. So there you need to I guess be more structured and more focused, but the stakeholder map probably is the first thing that you need to do, like to see what is the context. The second part after this is when we say understand the business. This is, again, I will try to demystify this because it sounds terrible. Again, it's one of those things like I always heard as a technical person, yeah, you have to understand the business. you have to be a good communicator. I always wondered, that sounds so obvious, but it doesn't help me. One thing you can do though, as a CTO, I learned exactly this. That's the most painful lesson I learned, was how does the money move through the organization, yeah? We try to pretend our businesses are very complex, right? And some, of course, are. You're like a multinational giant. Sure, it's hard to trace the money, right? Who buys what and who is responsible for who contributes how. But at the end of the day, you can look at any organization as money for goods, yeah? Money is being exchanged for some kind of a product. And there you can do something which is called value stream mapping, where let's say you're in the business of selling socks. Your company is in the business of selling socks. You're the head of data there. To understand the business basically means to understand how first how the sock is made. Yeah, where is it made? Who makes the sock, right? And this is the kind of and when it's made, how is it packaged? Where is it sent? And how is it sold? Right? You have in value stream mapping, you have several lenses, several swim lanes where you look at the process, and this is the first one where you look at if you sell an analog product, how does it move from the factory to the customer? Yeah, you need literally to draw this. Then the other lens is called information flow, and this is most interesting to technical people and data, in a way that this is you need to map how the data moves there, right? What data is collected in different parts. You know, in the factory, maybe there's some data collected. There's logistical data collected. Before this, there was marketing data collected before at the beginning. New customers register, and all of this. There's also a flow of data through the organization. And finally, in classical value stream mapping, you have the lead time, basically how long do things take. Yeah, and this is a bit of an operational topic. I think that's least interesting to data people. But this means understanding the business, something being built, something being sold. Yeah. And you can also map, like literally draw this again, like the stakeholder map. You need to draw it on Miro or some paper. And then literally you can go with this and ask people. You go to the marketing team and ask them, guys, where do you fit on this? And then put them there. And the more up in your organization you go with your value stream map, people are going to give you more information. And at some point you understand, you know, our business, okay, money comes inside, so something is built. So like money is invested in the company for a product, and a product is sold, generates revenue, and then gets reinvested. But you start to see real bottlenecks. For example, you realize that everything is great in production, but once the product needs to be delivered to the customer, then everything starts to become a problem. Yeah. So you start to find interesting bottlenecks there. But most importantly, you understand how your company makes money. Yeah. And that's to be honest, almost any conversation with management, which are your most important counterparts, has to start with you, almost like being in an interview. You need to be, because I will ask any data person, how do we make money? I would almost ask this as one of my first conversations. I don't want to hear about somebody coming to me and saying, my head of data saying, okay, we want to build whatever convolution neural network for whatever images of whatever in the socks factory. I'll ask, okay, but do you understand that we need like 15, I don't know, data engineers, I don't know, 7 deep learning experts, and our Amazon bill is going to be crazy. Why? I mean, why? Like, where does this fit? And then you need to tell me, yeah, but this is the bottleneck somewhere, and then you can improve the efficiency in this part of the business. So when we say understand the business, for me personally, that's what I did. I always try to do this value stream, how money is made. Yeah. And to map it somehow visually. And then I felt very comfortable. And this is something, it's like a living document with which you go around the company, and then it becomes better.
So stop, zoom out, and understand why you're doing the work that you're doing.
and draw it, because normally it's also complex somehow, right? And somebody's going to tell you, okay, this is how it looks. Somebody else is going to tell you, no, this is how it looks. But you should understand, like, from the beginning to end, how money is being made. And only then actually you can find the good use cases, because the normal data science use cases are terrible, right? They're normally things which are sound very exciting to the technical people building them, but there's no value. And nowadays, to be honest, it's very hard to be a data scientist, I would say, because at some point the businesses have understood this. I think 5 years ago, I think that's when it happened, where the business understood that this just doesn't work that way. And now if you're a data scientist and you try this, it's not going to work. I mean, most business people just tell you have to prove to me that this makes sense. You can't just tell me it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it was found out 5 years ago. Money was still cheap for some years. And I think, unfortunately, the last couple of years, data science was,
but that's good,
right in with the business. Yeah, absolutely.
But this, I think, is good, because if you're a business owner, I can tell you, the data teams are very expensive, right? You do want to make sure that this delivers value, and it's not really rocket science, to be honest. Unfortunately, I don't have an MBA, but I would like. I mean, I know there's all kinds of resources to get like a free MBA, whatever, like books and stuff. I can recommend it, to be honest. Like, have a look at how a budget is being made and how a business makes money. I think it's very easy to disregard that.
Absolutely. It's something we could probably dig into for quite some time, but I'm conscious of the clock. So I'm going to finish up with one question for today. So someone who's considering consulting, maybe from a product technical background, what's the best thing about consulting? What do you find most exciting?
That's an easy question, to be honest. Like, this is the reason why in my career I gravitate always to consulting, and I probably will spend most of my life doing that. It's just exciting. You understand how the world works. You're not in your bubble, especially if you do this type of more like strategy consulting, which is kind of you're not just doing data engineering and science consulting. You really have to go even like further deep into the wild. And there you do, I can tell you, I work on such topics on businesses which I never understood, I never knew, right? For example, suddenly you do such work for your local bus company, right? And then you start to understand, or your local, I don't know, internet provider. And suddenly you start to understand how the world works, because you talk to people, how they do things, what is their business model, what are the problems there. And then so intellectually it's extremely stimulating, because you learn so much about different topics. And I think so this intellectually I think is very stimulating, and I also do think that it is impactful, right? Even if you don't work in consulting but you use the skills in your job, that's what's gonna make your career successful, to be honest. The same skills are gonna make you successful as whatever head of data, chief data officer, the same skills. Without them, I don't think you can even have the job title, I think.
No, agreed. Super important. And that is all we have time for today. Great to finish on such a strong answer. But thank you very much for your time and your rich insights today, Boyan.
My pleasure. Thanks.
And thank you for coming on. And to all the listeners, don't forget to like and share so we can reach as many people as possible. Well, that is bye from us. Thanks once again, Boyan.
Bye-bye.
Ciao for now.